Especially in recruiting, people need dramatic examples to shake them out of apathy. As the dark night rises, Batman himself should step away from the dark side and into the bright light. That is America's brightest orange.
You are Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma State Cowboys, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, y'all, and hello, all. Welcome back to Locked On Oklahoma State, your daily stop for all things Cowboy and Cowgirl related. My name is Cody Stovall. I want to thank you kindly for stopping by to make this your first listen. We're available on all of your podcasting platforms, visually as well on YouTube. Find me personally on X at Aldeo State. Today, we're partially brought to you by Nissan. Do not miss your opportunity to capitalize on your next big adventure with Nissan and the all-new 2025 Armada. Stay with us for Armada Team of the Week a little bit later on in the episode. Meanwhile, we shift into the gear of recruiting Kaydin KD Batman Jones, of course, after grabbing the number one offensive tackle in the state in Aiden Martin. That should be something that's beneficial and potentially garnering the services of KD Batman Jones by way of Jenks, Oklahoma, who does have some familiarity with a former Cowboy, as we'll get into. This is absolutely phenomenal because much like with CJ Nixon last season, we went from outside of his top 10 to legitimately in his top 2 or 3 in a very short amount of time. But of course, KD Batman Jones, by way of Jenks, Oklahoma, is 5'11", 175 pounds. He's the number 1 ranked running back in the state, number 4 ranked overall player in the state of Oklahoma. He's won multiple state titles in track and field. He's a sub 100 meter guy. Under the tutelage of former Cowboy legend Jeremy Smith, he was able to rush for 1,264 yards and 11 touchdowns as a freshman in Broken Arrow. This previous season, he obviously went over to Jenks and made a massive name for himself. He ran for another 817 yards and 8 touchdowns on a shortened 8-game season this year, averaging over 101 yards per game. He has also 334 yards receiving, 385 yards in returns, including a 97-yarder. He could easily play wide receiver in college. And if you look at the offers list, I do firmly believe that some of these universities are exploring the possibility of trying to convince him to play wide receiver in college, much like the Tyreek Hill dichotomy that we ended up being the recipients of getting Tyreek Hill services because of the ability to play running back and also the track and field stuff that came along with it as he prepared for the Olympic trials. And KD Batman Jones is number 1 running back in the state for a reason. Yes, he has versatility to play a multitude of positions. I have had the privilege of seeing him down in Houston play some 7-on-7 ball. And when he was down there, he could have played wide receiver, but he also could have played some lockdown DB. This is not an individual that people were excited to go up against, let alone try to guard. During his 7-on-7 battle tournaments and things of that nature, he was talking about, obviously, the familiarity he has with OU, the visits to OU, visiting Tennessee, Texas A&M, Alabama, Kentucky, Louisville, Houston, UCF. Also vying for his services are naturally Texas Tech, Mizzou, Oregon, Nebraska, Arizona State, Colorado, just to name a few. He's mentioned specifically that the family atmosphere matters to him. His dad is a Oklahoma Sooner, so of course, having that ability to kind of lean back on his time at OU is obviously going to be instrumental in his recruiting process, as is the connection that's been building between his dad, himself, and DeMarco Murray. Of course, DeMarco Murray is a legend, so it would be a massive deal if Oklahoma State were able to obtain the services of this insanely talented individual. He has expressed the interest to play early as a freshman. And when you look back at some of the greats like Jeremy Smith, who had the ability to do the same, play early as a freshman, he's also heavily involved with not only the recruiting process, but some of the private working in with the running backs and things of that nature. Of course, Jeremy's connection to Oklahoma State is beneficial. There were some recent pictures going out of himself and Tracin Wallace and Cory Patterson out there on the recruiting trail, seeing Batman KD Jones. And realistically, again, we went from not even in his top 10 to legitimately in his, what is seemingly top 2 in a very short amount of time, primarily because of the new coaching staff. We've discussed previously how this recruiting has jumped pretty remarkably. The fact that we view things a little bit differently. And in some of my conversations with Jeremy Smith, as it pertains directly to KD Batman Jones, is he's a dog, point blank, period. Off the field, he's one of the nicest, kindest, most gentle individuals you will ever meet. But on the field, he does not reciprocate any ill will towards the other team, right? He's not afraid to get in your face. He's not afraid to speak his opinion, but he can also back it up. And that is one of the biggest things when you're looking at Kaydin KD Batman Jones, is not only he's an in-state guy, and in order for you to have success, typically you got to find a way to lock down the in-state. The fact that his dad is a former Sooner and they're going to have all these connections with the staff, including the ones that have been building with DeMarco Murray, is definitely something that we've had to overcome. But to go from where we were to where we are in a short amount of time, that tells me that Coach Cory Patterson has made a massive imprint, as has Tracin Wallace, and of course the tutelage of Jeremy Smith is going to be pretty important here. Not to mention the fact that the Cowboys just landed the number 1 offensive tackle in the state, number 44 ranked tackle in America, according to On3 Sports. Aiden Martin, coming in at 6'5", 275 pounds from Berryhill, Oklahoma. He also plays defensive tackle. He can also play power forward / center in basketball. On the defensive side of the ball, he has 10 sacks. He's in on the forced fumble recovery. He even has not only an interception, but an interception he returned back for almost 30 yards. He's a pancake specialist that can pull, whether it be from a guard or tackle position. Whatever he's going to do in the weight room is probably going to dictate where he plays in college. But nonetheless, he seems to be a tried and true offensive tackle that has a lot of maneuverability. So even if we needed to put him at a different spot due to injury or underclassmen issue, I feel like he would be able to slide in pretty seamlessly. Another thing that is pretty interesting, outside of the fact that, of course, we're going up against Arkansas and KU and Kansas State. He did already commit to be a Cowboy, but a lot of the crystal ball prognostications had him going to Kansas State. So, of course, this is a huge get for the Cowboys. Plus, Robert Allen recently mentioned in a write-up that we were really only targeting 1 offensive tackle for this class due to the age of a lot of the underclassmen that we have, not only coming in for this season, but should obviously return for next season. And I think of guys like Jack and Dean that are going to be instrumental in Oklahoma State getting back to where they're supposed to be. But again, this kind of comes down to me to the effect of Cory Patterson, right? We've talked ad nauseum on the defensive side of the ball, bringing in nothing but SEC and NFL flavor to the coaching staff. A lot of the guys that Todd Grantham has brought in has coached with him at other stops in the SEC. Some of them have even branched off and gotten jobs in the NFL and worked in the NFL for a couple of years. So that side of the ball is completely different in the landscape of recruiting. It is absolutely insane to realize that on the offensive side of the ball, it's pretty comparable. We do have some of these guys like Cory Patterson, who's produced several Doak Walker Award finalist level competitors, some dudes that have rushed for almost 1,700 yards, putting up almost Ollie Gordon level numbers. And of course, you do have to look at Ollie Gordon winning a Doak Walker Award at Oklahoma State. If the offensive line gets back to where it potentially could be, with Andrew Mitchell, with Cooper Bassett being in tow now, this is, to me, a really good sales pitch for somebody like KD Batman Jones as to why Oklahoma State could be your future place. And if we're going to do a comp, because we love comps here, when you watch this film, to me, it seems very reminiscent of Justice Hill. One of the biggest things that I would say separates him from Justice Hill, especially this early on, is Justice Hill's become absolutely legendary out of the backfield for the Baltimore Ravens. And we saw a decent amount of that at Oklahoma State with him. But that is something that, because of the 7-on-7 circuit, I feel like Kaydin Batman Jones has already excelled in the receiver department. So he could be somebody that we could utilize in different packages, right? We could perhaps slide him out to be part of a trip set as an additional slot receiver. We can get him on the jet sweep game, the different levels of reverses that you can have with somebody like that is huge for Oklahoma State. And more importantly, if you can get a guy that's been an OU lean for quite some time, that also has offers from Tennessee, Oregon, Alabama, so on and so forth, if you can convince somebody like that to come to Oklahoma State over OU and all these other SEC programs, that should set us up for even more success for in-state recruiting. We have to view this from a completely different landscape, as previously we may have been in on these kind of guys, but we weren't necessarily in at the end, right? We may have made some top 8, some top 7, some top 5s, even some top 3s. But at the end of the day, more often than not, we lose these recruiting battles, or at least we have historically. Now, I think we have a legitimate chance here because of the interaction on social media that the coaches have. even some of the old school guys like Todd Grantham and Doug Meacham have been absolutely all over the place when it comes to promoting things, and the university and the former Heisman guys, Doak Walker guys, Bolitnikoff guys, to basically put ourselves out there as a university that can, in fact, be a destination school. If you land the services of KD Jones after you just landed Aiden Martin, that sends a message that locking down the state of Oklahoma is a possibility. And I think even last year, getting Carl Leon Young is huge in kind of chopping down that trees. Now, perhaps we could also garner the service of Rickland Holmes, but we'll talk about that at a little bit of a later date. Until then, we got to spread some joy here. We got to spread some love with the right automobile for you. Ladies and gentlemen, when you're trying to get to your next big adventure, you have to keep Nissan in mind. This week's Armada and the clear-cut team of the week have to be accentuated because college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart from some of the other stars and unexpected upsets. These guys showcase the strength and sheer power, speed, athleticism to push their team forward. The team of the week has got to be the Duke Blue Devils. John Shire's squad has led National Player of the Year candidate Cooper Flagg into ripping through the ACC, going 19-1. The Dookie Blue Devils are plus 434 in points in ACC games. That is the largest point differential by a power conference team in league play since Kentucky in 1953-54. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, you've got to say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what the Duke Blue Devils have done thus far this season. Your call to action makes it very clear that you need to be part of the team of the week and also conquer your road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the new Nissan Armada or any of the Nissan's outstanding vehicles lineup. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, Pathfinder, and go find your next big adventure. To do this, all you need to do is shop at USA.com. That is shop at USA.com to explore your next big adventure in the new Nissan lineup. The Cowboys are Big 12 champions once again. We have taken our rightful place at the top of the heap when it comes to wrestling. This is a sport that Oklahoma State should own in this conference. And David Taylor is only the second individual in the Big 12 to win the conference in his very first year. Cale Sanderson did the same thing at Iowa State in 2007 before he decided to scoot on over to Penn State. I have to give props as well, though, to Northern Iowa. They don't have the facilities as Iowa and Iowa State. They don't have the NIL capabilities. They don't have the finances. They don't even have the historical traditions that both Iowa and Iowa State have. Yet, nonetheless, they put themselves squarely in position to potentially win a Big 12 title. And realistically, Oklahoma State was able to win the conference championship, A, because of Wyatt Hendrickson, and B, because we were able to establish such a massive lead early on. So the things that we were able to do in the early onset of the Big 12 tournament, at the end of the day, is really what equaled Big 12 champions. Now, when it came to the finals, the Cowboys did have 6 individuals make it to the championship finals, and the only winner ended up being Wyatt Hendrickson. Now, some of those dudes were going up against former national champions or multi-year national champions. So even the fight that we put up in some of those matches were definitely worth their weight in gold. And you can see the improvements between last year and this year. Not to mention the fact when you're talking about seeing improvements, John Smith needs to have his own cam. We need to have a John Smith cam. That wasn't my idea. I saw it on social media, but this needs to happen. And it is absolutely phenomenal to see John Smith out there in the stands hooting and hollering as a true fan, right? There is no reluctancy to him being in full fan mode. And it's phenomenal for us to see, but it's also got to be beneficial for David Taylor because it's not easy replacing a legend, especially when, you know, the legend still has a decent amount of capabilities. A lot of say, especially in the state of Oklahoma when it comes to the youth wrestling, but I also feel like John Smith understands that David Taylor is bringing a little bit of a different recipe to the state of Oklahoma when it comes to wrestling because the point system that they've been able to establish up in State College is absolutely huge. And the technical side of the game that John Smith was so legendary at, David Taylor's kind of turned that into more of a point scoring affair. Now, in the championship finals, it seemed as though we were a little reluctant to be ultra aggressive, which you also got to understand it makes sense because sometimes when you're ultra aggressive, you can put yourself in a bad spot and you can get yourself put on your back. Troy Spradley had a phenomenal tournament. The fact that Teague Travis went from obviously the starter wrestling injured and likely out for the entirety of the season, where perhaps you're approaching the subject of a redshirt year, for him to come out in the Big 12 tournament and knowingly have to go from the very bottom of the pile, completely unranked, to finishing top 3 or 4 to punch a ticket to the Nationals. It's insane that he was able to do that. Now, of course, we have seen Teague Travis, and there are other Big 12 schools that have seen Teague Travis wrestle. So it wasn't completely out of the realm of possibility that he could, in fact, do precisely what he did, and that is get all the way to the national championships after pretty much missing the entirety of the season. That, I think, is the funnest story of the bunch. But, of course, we had to make it interesting. And shout out to Mr. Johnson at Iowa State, right? We had to have a little bit of assistance from the Cyclones to bring home this Big 12 championship. And, of course, the Hammer brought it home in the end, Wyatt Hendrickson. But even that wasn't without a little bit of turmoil, because he did wrestle Colton Schultz earlier in the year in Galgaraiba. Thankfully, I got to be at that event, and he more or less handled Colton Schultz from Arizona State the whole time. Colton Schultz had a good game plan, and he caught Wyatt Hendrickson napping a couple times, which led to some points, and it did get kind of hairy there towards the end of the match. We had an injury timeout. It appears as though that Wyatt Hendrickson hurt his wrist in some capacity. Hopefully it's just like a jammed sort of ordeal. But the second lieutenant got another Big 12 championship, and he sets himself up, if healthy, to make a pretty good run at the Nationals. Now, of course, you're going to have a couple of guys ahead of him, including one of the biggest names in the history of wrestling. But if he's injury-free, we've seen him show some things this year that he hasn't been able to show the last couple of years at Air Force. So the learning from David Taylor and Jimmy Kennedy and Thomas Gilman has obviously gone a long way for him. And even some of that, I think, is visible by the emergence of Luke Serber. Luke Serber was the Iron Man for Oklahoma State wrestling. He would wrestle at whatever weight, whatever time. It didn't matter to him. He would do whatever John Smith asked, at whatever weight John Smith asked him to be at. And this season, he got a lot of benefits from not only being at 197, but surely he got to learn a lot from David Taylor, and being in the same room as Wyatt Hendrickson and being a former heavyweight. Surely there's some crossover there that has led to him having a big season. The fact that Tegan Jameson was able to take down the number 1 ranked wrestler, and not only number 1 ranked wrestler, but a national champion, and Andrew Alirez, was huge. I had Andrew Alirez winning a Big 12 title. That didn't happen because of Tegan Jameson. So again, the things that we did early on gave us enough points that the cushion was somewhat bearable, even though the last day of the championship rounds didn't exactly go in our favor. We lost a lot of close ones. Going into overtime was not beneficial for us. But at the same time, these are things that you learn going into nationals. And even though the race for the team title is likely Penn State and Penn State only, we do have a chance at retribution with Iowa. Not only that, but we also have a chance at retribution with getting higher than Northern Iowa in the point standings. At the end of the day, we have Big 12 championship back where it belongs in Stillwater, America. We did crown another Big 12 champion in Wyatt Hendrickson. And now it sets us up for some pretty cool storylines in nationals. Can we take down Iowa? Can we provide a significant degree of separation between us and Northern Iowa after they had a phenomenal tournament and they had an amazing game plan? And if it wasn't for Johnson at Iowa State or Wyatt Hendrickson, we wouldn't be talking about having a Big 12 championship. And that's actually insanely impressive, again, because this was like top 5 most points ever scored in Big 12 tournament history. So it's not like Northern Iowa didn't deserve pushing us to our limits. They did. They showed up prepared. They had a phenomenal game plan. They were able to execute the game plan. The thing that they weren't able to capitalize on was bonus points going up against Dustin Plott. And if Dustin Plott does give up bonus points, then we are talking about a different Big 12 champion. So hats off to them for showing up the final day a little bit more prepared to some degree than we were. But also shout out to David Taylor and all of the Cowboys that made those epic runs early on to give us enough points, to give us a little bit of breathing room, to allow the closer, the hammer, Wyatt Henderson, to bring it home even while suffering an injury. Hopefully he can heal up and we can make this national storyline much bigger, because there are some big things here. We got to chop down the Iowa tree. We also got to show that there's a degree of separation between us and Northern Iowa. And this is a race for second place. And even on top of that, though, we haven't been in the top 3, top 5 in a couple years. So this will be good for not only Oklahoma State, but David Taylor, to see what we can learn from the Big 12s, learn from the Iowa duel, and make it applicable in the national championships, to make it a viable possibility to show that Oklahoma State is going to surpass or be past Iowa in the foreseeable future. Speaking of surpassing people, do not surpass your opportunity to be more connected than ever to your university, your favorite players, through NIL. The Roy app is the return on you. This is your opportunity to get in on the ground floor of what has become, in my personal opinion, one of the best assets for NIL and universities for a fan base to feel more connected. Here on the Oklahoma State Show, if you've ever wished to be more directly involved with your favorite Oklahoma State athletes, you can now be a part of their journey with Roy, the NIL app that puts fans in more control. Before Roy, NIL deals were the backdoor, shady kind of viewed ordeals. Now, with fans like you, you can have a clear way to directly support the players that you love the most with Roy. You can make a real impact and feel closer to the athletes representing Oklahoma State. With Roy, you get to choose the players that you want to support directly. You can decide how much you want to contribute to each individual player, and you also get exclusive content directly from the athletes that you are specifically going to back. And the best part is, if your favorite player does in fact transfer, you will get your money back. So it's a risk-free way to show your support and make your voice heard. Support your favorite players directly and help shape the future of Oklahoma State Cowboy sports by downloading the Roy app from the App Store and start backing the Oklahoma State Cowboys and Cowgirl athletes the way they deserve, with transparency, trust, and making a real impact directly from you. This is the future of college sports. Join it today by downloading Roy and supporting your favorite players. Go download the Roy app. Return on you. This is your opportunity to make an investment and have it directly reflected in an immediate return that brings you closer to Oklahoma State University. So we'll shift gears a little bit here as the Cowboys are on the hardwood currently taking on Cincinnati. Not looking great, but that's okay, because the recruiting class I feel pretty confident in. We knew more or less what we're getting into this season. We might still have an opportunity to punch a ticket to the NIT. We'll have to wait and see how that goes. But I wouldn't classify basketball as an early struggle. We knew this was going to be a rebuilding year. We got in a little bit late to the hiring, which means we got in a little bit late to the transfer portal. So naturally, we were going to miss out on some particular candidates. We wanted to have an athletic team that was capable of playing some defense and giving teams fits, especially inside Gallagher-Iba. 12-3 at home. You cannot complain about that. The road record should get better, hopefully, in due time, with Mekhi Ragland coming over. Obviously, you've got Ben Ahmed coming over and Ryan Crotty shooting 46.6% from the three-point arc. That's what we needed. That's what we have coming. What we thought we already had coming was a potential run at the national championship in softball. It appears as though coming into the year, we had our deepest pitching rotation because Riley Crandall was an All-American at Baylor that was able to dominate everybody in the conference, including Oklahoma State, OU, and Texas. Riley Crandall, for whatever reason, isn't exactly in the form she was last season, so perhaps this is going to take a little bit of time to iron that out. Now, of course, Ruby Malin coming in, another All-American from Washington. We knew she was going to be huge, and she has been. One of the biggest surprises, I think, early on has been Katie Coots. Katie Coots was going to be part of that four-lady rotation, But you also had the 6'1" powerhouse that throws over 70 in Kyra Aycock. And people tend to forget that she was one of the top recruits in the country. She turned down several SEC schools to be part of what Kenny Gajewski has cooking here in Stillwater. It just, for whatever reason, hasn't exactly come to fruition for her. And last year, she battled through a significant amount of injuries. So the assumption was a healthy Kyra Aycock, an emergency Katie Coots, an All-American Riley Crandall, an All-American Ruby Malin was going to be able to do more than enough on the mound to put Oklahoma State in position that we weren't really going to lose all that often anyways. And then you have Amanda Hassler, the all-star catcher coming over from NC State. That was going to be huge. Megan Delgadillo. Cheese is the fastest player, likely in the Big 12, possibly one of the fastest players in America. Yeah, her style should have been massive. And then you also have people like Carly Godwin that can launch it into the stratosphere at one swing of the bat. When you combined all of that, it felt like this was a team that was going to be able to legitimately compete for a national championship. But it's just not all quite coming together yet. Thankfully, it's not quite midway through the season. We haven't really begun Big 12 play. So there's still a lot of ground that we can make up here. Losing 2 out of 3 to Texas Tech obviously was not the ideal way to start the Big 12s. It now puts us in a position that we have to get hot at the right time. That's a possibility. Speaking of getting hot at the right time, the Cowboys and in baseball, Josh Holliday's squads are so up and down. Some days it's just swinging at air, right? We've had multiple games this year where we had 14, 15, 16 Ks. Offensively, it's going to be hard to produce runs when you're doing that. My frustration is some of the inability at times to play small ball, although we just found a way to get a couple huge wins, huge as in the differentiation, I guess you could consider the scores to be huge. But, of course, you've got to win more of these games because we do have some black eye losses. The pitching rotation, we don't know what we have yet. We have a lot of power. We have a lot of size. We have a lot of movement, but we have a tendency to walk too many or hit too many. We give up too much free baseball. But I will give a tip of the cap because we played a significant amount of small ball the other day. And Tom Holliday was on air talking about, everyone talks about the old Oklahoma State 80s teams, that could put up runs and bunches with anybody. And it was always going to put us in a position to get to Omaha. But what people tend to forget is the RBI numbers were indicative of how many people we got on base by earning walks, not getting a walk, but earning a walk. Like I tell my pitchers, if you can get a pitcher to pitch 10 pitches in that at bat, even if you don't win, it's still a winning at bat because you're extending his arm and you're getting closer to them getting into the bullpen. And more often than not, middle relievers can offer some opportunities to kind of climb back in a game. So I don't know exactly what we have quite yet, other than talent. We have crazy talent. We've shown now a couple games that we can play some small ball. So it would be interesting to see if we continue to merge the two together. However, Cowboy golf is off to a hot start. We could win a national championship again here pretty quickly. Dave Smith seems to be putting the right pieces together in cross country to climb towards another national championship. But with all of the early struggles and instability in certain sports that we didn't foresee, this, to me, allows Mike Gundy and the Cowboy football squad to turn this whole thing around. Even if Cowgirls, make a massive run, which they're capable of doing, same could be said about Cowboy baseball. Even if that were to happen, we need Cowboy football to get us back to Arlington. And I think we have the staff shakeups and recruiting acumen now to potentially do it. So hopefully the spring offers a lot more clarity on who's going to be the starting quarterback, what the running back room is going to kind of shake out to be, so on and so forth. But I have faith, especially if you're seeing the recruiting uptick we've had, the SEC, NFL pedigree of our coaching staffs on both sides of the ball. It's showing through. So hopefully we can show it on the field. That's all we're going to have for this one right here. As always, I love you. God bless. Go Pokes. Thank you for tuning in to make this your first listen here on Locked On Oklahoma State. You could be anywhere. So happy you choose to be here. Do me a favor. Go ahead and hit the like button. You can hit the dislike button too. If you didn't like it, that's okay. More importantly, share, comment, and subscribe my podcast. People out there, you know what you do. Hit the stars, leave the reviews. Appreciate you. Later, taters.